Okay, dear colleagues, let's start. We'll do it in English without translation to make it more concise and probably a little bit more comfortable for our guests. I start with introduction of myself and Russian participants. I'm Vice Director of the MGIMO University, the university which is well known to our, at least to some of our friends, university which is a partner university of the Russian Council for Foreign Affairs since, to be frank, since Igor Ivanov simply a professor of the MGIMO University. And besides, MGIMO contributed a lot to the very foundation of the council. I guess this university is familiar to the General Secretary, who was our guest, and who is always welcome there. Besides, MGIMO, for more than 4 decades, hosts the Russian UN Association, and here it's the Vice Chairman of the Russian UN Association and some people in the room. There are active participants to the Russian UN Association, even the General Secretary of the previous year UN Moscow model. Together with me at the table, those who are called in the program young scholars. Some of them they're scholars, some of them postgraduate students. Let me start with the lady. It's Marina Petrova, who is postgraduate student at the Chair Department of International Economic Relations and Russian Trade Policy. Then Vladislav Vorotnikov, who's at the last year of postgraduate studies at the Department of European and American Studies, but he deals himself rather with Baltic region, with Baltic states. And then Yulia Suvorova, she's also postgraduate student, but at the Department of Oriental Studies. She joined MGIMO after graduation of Oriental Studies Institute, and she works upon economic and political interactions in the Middle East. Those say all these boring issues in her hands. The room, as I said, is filled with the students of the MGIMO, those who are graduated mainly the 4th year of their bachelor studies, and they're also ready to participate to the discussion. And now I need to give the floor to Kathy Calvin, President and Chief Executive Officer of this foundation, whose directors are at the table now. The floor is yours.
Thank you, spasiba. We are delighted to be here with you today. The UN Foundation Board has spent several days in St. Petersburg and is now in Moscow. It is the first time the UN Foundation Board has been here, as Igor Ivanov mentioned earlier, and we are eager to learn from you today about how you see the role of Russia in the world. I'd like to introduce my young colleagues as well. Is that fair to say? I think so. So let me start with my young colleague across the table, Mohammed Yunus, who is the founder of the Grameen Bank from Bangladesh, Yuan Ming from Peking University in China, Gro Brundtland from Norway, former executive director of the World Health Organization, Fabio Barbosa, who runs the Abril Group, media group in Brazil, my apologies. Of course, Igor Ivanov, your colleague. Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations from Ghana. And Emma Rothschild, who is a social scientist and historian now at Harvard University. So we have some scholars among us as well. I'm Kathy Calvin. I'm the president of the UN Foundation, and I'm very proud that we're talking to young people here today, which is something, frankly, that our board does almost on every visit to a country. We're always eager to hear the perspectives of young people. And in the United States, we make an effort to speak with young people in all of our work. We are active in social media because we think that's an important way for us to listen as well as talk. We are engaged with the Model UN and global classrooms because we are also running the UN Association of the USA, and we're so happy to see our colleagues here from the UN Association of Russia. We have a campaign called Girl Up that connects girls in the United States with girls around the world so that they can understand the importance of the lives they're leading and what it takes to make sure a girl anywhere in the world can grow up healthy and educated. We were very proud to see Malala, the young Pakistani teenager, at the UN this week celebrating her 16th birthday and calling for education for all girls and all boys. We also are proud to work with the UN itself because young people are a priority for this Secretary General, as they were for Kofi Annan when he was Secretary General. He's made young people one of his 5 priorities, and he's even named a special envoy for youth who sits just outside his office on the 38th floor of the United Nations. He's a young man from Jordan, and we are working with him now to help create further outreach to young people and to listen to them to talk about the most important task the UN is facing right now, which is to write a development framework for the next 15 years from now till 2030, when you all will be truly running the world. So we're very proud to have an opportunity to work with him, and we're eager to hear from you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. As I've been asked, first I give the floor to the Russian colleagues, those who try to, to burn up the discussion if they can. And on Friday, when we discussed today's meeting, we agreed that this burning up will be about not simply Russia's in modern world, as it's said in official program of your stay here, but also will tackle upon some issues which are on the UN agenda or linked with the UN, and that is why I asked to think over Vladislav, how UN is linked, how it interacts with other non-UN organizations, because, and I guess I was right when General Secretary mentioned UN, G8 and G20 interactions. Then we go to UN and non-UN economic organizations, especially WTO, since we know that many economic organizations, Bretton Woods institutes, which are considered to be absolutely separate, but they were born within UN very foundation process. And then we move already mentioned Middle East, since international institutions, multilateral institutions, and the UN, they're tremendously involved there. So, Vladislav, the floor is yours. You'll have at about 4 minutes each, and then you'll be asked questions and.
Okay. Distinguished guests, distinguished Mr. Secretary General, distinguished Mr. Minister. First of all, I would like to thank our organizers for the opportunity and honor to share some of our ideas with the foremost global leaders of today's world. So my speech would be sort of maybe introductory in general, and to start with, I would like to share some ideas about the today's world. It's no need to rehearse the idea that today's world is getting more and more intertwined, interconnected, and for several decades the essence and substance of the world has been perfectly described with the notions of butterfly effect and global village. Such complex self-regulated systems as today's world require, I believe, more predictability, more confidence for all actors, states, NGOs, IGOs, business, even individuals. Of course, the idea of a single global government is utopian and unexecutable in practice. However, I'm sure that global governance, not government, but governance, in terms of making the worldwide processes more manageable, more predictable, more stable, is something required by the humanity, and this idea of manageable world is appropriate to that goal. In fact, the UN global practices of last almost 70 years, proved that point. Some people really indeed attribute to the UN the role of the world government. To their regret, it's hardly possible. Moreover, the UN has never looked towards such functions. At the same time, the UN succeeded to become the core element of global governance and still plays a global role in global politics without any intentions to dominate or monopolize the sphere of global policy making, policy planning. It was in the UN Charter where the signatory states first highlighted the role of regional arrangements or agencies for dealing with such matters relating to the maintenance of international peace and security, as it's set forth in Article 52. Another step to institutionalize the system of global governance was establishment and development of the UN Regional Economic Commissions. Then the efforts to ensure sustainable development, reduce poverty, achieve Millennium Development Goals have been implemented within the framework of the United Nations Development Programme. So since that was launched in 1965. Since at least the 1970s, the UN has aimed to create and apply better practices of world governance, including engagement of other international organizations, non-governmental institutions, into the process of resolution of global issues. It's sufficient to recall the role which such organizations started to play since 1980s in such areas as European security, combating apartheid, protection of human rights, and environmental protection. Also, the new phenomenon was interaction between the UN and multilateral clubs or forums like G8 and G20, which in some spheres first tended to replace the UN in managing global processes, but then we see that during the crisis, G8 and G20 have become the institutions where the initiatives were arising easier, but nevertheless these projects were realized through traditional long-established network of intergovernmental organizations. And it also clear that substantial amount of initiatives, global initiatives, stems from the UN and UN family institutions. This is precisely the complex system of the above-mentioned multilateral institutions, which is considered to be the architecture of global government, or to put it better, global governance. The role of Russian Federation in the today's world, in the international relations, has formidably changed after the collapse of the USSR.
Don't tell us the whole history of these 20 years.
Yes, of course.
Just concentrate on something and then...
Yes. After the collapse of the USSR, all political and ideological restrictions were lifted. Russia got engaged into a great amount of international mechanisms of interaction, starting from Security Council up to Bretton Woods institutions, from traditional regional organizations to multilateral forums like G8, G20, Paris and London clubs. The contemporary Russia became the initiator of the whole range of international and regional institutions. It's nowadays the cornerstone of integration at post-Soviet area, within the Commonwealth of Independent States, the Customs Union, the Eurasian Union. In addition, it acts also at a global level within the framework of, for example, BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And there, in joint initiatives, Russia accumulates interests of countries for really various parts of the world. To sum my short speech up, participation of Russia in mechanisms of global governance is sure to prove its role as a global player. It also makes possible for the international community to use wealth of Russian experience of activities within the framework of the UN, just inherited from the previous period, from the Soviet period. So to use this wealth in such regions as Africa, Asia, Latin America. And finally, it also makes the international environment more predictable, I hope so, and facilitates resolution by international community of issues related to sustainable development. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your overarching and I would say optimistic approach to multilateral institutions. Should we ask Vladislav now or we'll give the floor to other participants?
I think maybe the others should make the
Okay. Okay. So who next? Marina.
Good afternoon. I will continue the discussion with the economic aspects, including international development assistance. Generally speaking, modern multilateral institutions are a base of the world economy. They created basic standards and rules of conduct in the world economy and finance. The first efforts were made by creating Bretton Woods institutions. However, failed International Trade Organization and General Agreement on Trade and on Tariffs and Trade were actually designed only for a part of the world, mainly for developed countries, without taking into account the emerging economies. In terms of the division of the world, the founders didn't see the potential that hid the colonial Asia and Africa. On the other hand, multilateral institutions, primarily the UN, have contributed to the fact that the system of the world economy and finance have become more fair. The first steps were made in 1960s with the creating of United Nations Conference on the Trade and Development and the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Thanks to European social democracy, the mechanism of official development assistance formed a generalized system of preferences, focusing also on the poorest countries. Obviously, the modern world has shown that the effort that we took in the past are not sufficient to stabilize the economic and financial development. In the 1990s, the search for new models started. Actively involved developing giants of the world economy, China, India, other countries of Central and Eastern Europe, and Russia. I think the ending crisis will form a new or will completely change the old system of regulation of economic institutions. It is based on more democratic principles, as we see in G20, a greater connection between the social and political freedom and economic development, basing on the modern system of international development assistance. Multilateral financial institutions, fortunately, are no longer to give recommendations to the countries that do not will to follow them. But under the natural process of integration, the voluntary integration, the common efforts were successful. The phase of the crisis is finished for Portugal and the Baltic countries, stabilized the situation in Spain and France. Yes, there are still problems in Greece and partly in Cyprus, but even they show some successful efforts to recover. As for the Russian Federation, it was the first crisis that Russia took part on an equal footing, because for the time the crisis started, Russia was the participant of all the multilateral systems or was going to join them, I mean the World Trade Organization. Moreover, the summit of 2008-2009 and its offers have become an important element of the reforms. Russia was one of the initiators of reconsideration of aid assistance orientation, paying attention to the poorest countries in post-Soviet Eurasia and South Eurasia, Afghanistan and Pakistan. As we understand, the economic stability in these countries is directly related to the threat of global security. Already was mentioned BRICS countries. We see that these new institutions tend to systematically walk through multilateral institutions. And even the intention of Russia and China and other countries to invest in the world stability is a great success.
Thank you. And on the Middle East.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity to address our results of our research and our ideas in this round table. I would like to address on the Middle East, as Artem Margin said. Officially, the recent changes in the Middle East demonstrate, as far as I understand, lack of governance as much. Yes, we could agree on these changes to be propelled by different organs and the UN as well. And suddenly we found out that international organizations have room and role in the Arab Spring, both Libya and Egypt and the rest of the countries in the Middle East. This could result much more tragic events without League of Arab States and the UN itself took a role in these processes. Like Tunisia, a country which no one could ever think to be a trigger of the revolutions, but it happens. A civil case in the neighboring countries looks much more glaring and much more dangerous, since we can predict continuous civil war in Syria, for example, and Syria-Israel clashes, if not war, in the future. The only way against these barriers and tendencies of development, it is institutional coordination efforts. Respect should be paid to Mr. Annan, who was an international envoy and mediator to Syria, and who personally believes that differences between opposite parts in the conflict can be bridged, and we absolutely support these ideas. I hope that the Arab Spring will go down, and this summer has already shown counter-tendency, I mean Egypt, and the Middle East should return from political Islam as a leading party. Nevertheless, international organizations and multilateral institutions should make a lot of efforts in this direction. And as I believe it will bring much more stability, more money for development, and more modernity to the Middle East. As we know, the EU put lots of attention into its eastern neighbors, which also suffered a lot before, and it would be a crucial mistake not to put the same efforts to develop the Middle East, as EU made efforts to develop the southeastern flank to become a global southeastern flank. And nowadays, Greater Middle East, with its instability, and as a result, high migration rate, should be addressed like one of the most important issues. Probably it can sound geopolitically, but we all wait that this great region, as a cradle of civilization, will rise and overcome its hard times. In the meantime, as such countries as Afghanistan, Pakistan, the problem regions of India and neighboring very special part of China, Xinjiang, they got special attention from the UN, the G8, NATO, and other multilateral organizations. They invest from time to time to these regions, and through the UN has history, we also see such example. As we all remember, the UN did it best for Africa since 1960s, 1970s, of course by assist of regional organizations as African Union and sub-regional organizations as ECOWAS, the West African, and SADC, the Southern Africa, had many records of success, and also the Latin America in the early 90s. And these initiatives were well propelled by the above-mentioned organizations, and they simply drag out these regions from instability and underdevelopment. So the Greater Middle East needs the same initiatives. And we should let those forces or countries to act multilaterally to bring to Middle East peace and stability, staying altogether against obsolete and poisonous ideology which stayed in the old ages and when the life of one person meant nothing. And we should distinguish social move towards better life in the Middle East. We all know that this, as we say, revolutions start, of course, from down, start from the wishes of the Arab people to have changes in their life. But Russia could not accept, hints of using military force on the Syria problem, as we already once supported the intervention in Libya, and we see that it didn't stop the conflict at all. Of course, Russian Federation fully respects a responsibility to protect doctrine adopted by the UN members, but government as a shield itself should not protect their people first of all. And to finalize my words, I would like to say that we need to be less preoccupied for the issues of form. I mean, who will sit on the table, and we should be much more focused on issues, what exactly would be summed up, and will the leaders and ministers talk about, and what practical outcomes can emerge from our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So apart from the UN, we mentioned the dimension, we managed to mention global governance, Russia's role, different forms and models of integration, WTO, Middle East, different regional groupings. So I guess it could be rather provocative, I mean, what you said. So be ready to answer the questions. And the questions or comments. Young Ming, please.
Thank you very much. I'm here and I try to think one of my colleagues at home, our vice dean of the School of International Relations, he got his PhD from this distinguished university 15 years ago. So really, I feel my link with this institution. I'm very much impressed by three of you. Congratulations. I think you did a great job. Especially mentioning when we talk about global governance, you mentioned both on the global level and also the regional level, those new sort of a building up of new mechanisms to face the challenges of this, we call the new era globalization, integrated from political, economic, those kind of things. And I try to think those new thinking, building new mechanisms, both globally, G20, 8 to G20, and those regional organizations, mechanisms like Shanghai Cooperation Organization and others, should base on deep understanding of what happened in the past, in history. So I just wonder what kind of cross-disciplinary work, especially here in this institution, you could contribute in the future, both faculty and the young, bright brains joined together to think that kind of more intellectually, but with this modern, really modern sense of understanding of what's challenging, what's the new challenges. How put those really cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary, that kind of a work, or based on your personal, Marina, your personal experiences of your studying experiences, what helped you?
Thank you very much for your comment and a question. As for my experience, I think one of the most interesting things that happened in my research in the economic sphere, it was the financial crisis and how it changed the attitude to world trade and world economic system. For example, the developed countries which for decades were struggling for liberalization of the trade, during the crisis we saw that many of them put new tariffs, so they raised the tariff and non-tariff barriers. On the other hand, the emerging countries such as China and South Korea, probably for the first time, they were more interested in open trade than the developed countries. If talking about examples, it could be the agreement of South Korea and European Union with the automobiles. It was very surprising because now the volumes of production and trade of South Korea is increasing, and the competitiveness of their production is also very high. So it was the European Union who delayed this agreement. So I think talking about the regulating of world trade and world economic and financial system, we should see the increasing role of the developing countries, the emerging economies. Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I was more hoping in this gathering to talk to you, the young people, what's going on here. One way is the scholarly things, discussions, and so on. It can continue. But what about young people? What are they doing? What they want to do? What do they look for? Particularly, it's very special generation that you have. 25 years or less years back, there was a country called Soviet Union and disappeared. And nobody knew that it's going to disappear. And it did. It's just melted away. And there was a wall called Berlin Wall. And it was a frightening thing. The whole world was kind of threatened by that whole wall. And one fine morning, that disappeared too. And this is the country which emerged out of that. So your generation is the first generation after that, Berlin Wall, Soviet Union, and so on. So how do you see yourself in the global context where you are? Are you part of the global young people, or you are Russian young people? They're very different than because of your history, your other things. So where do you place yourself? Not just three of you, all of you here, all the young people. We would like to get that feeling from you, what you look at the world as it is. For example, you are the first country which went to the outer space. And it thrilled the whole world that when Sputnik went around the world, we were kids watching that Sputnik, and the whole world saw. And this is the nation. And what is the next one you are throwing into the atmosphere? You should be ready for that, and you are the young nation who will be doing that. You are not the Soviet Union. You are a completely new generation, and your thoughts is not those scholarly things. I'm sure you do that, but you as a person, what do you want to see? What do you want to feel? What kind of world you want to see? We want to see the communism came for a purpose, because there are lots of problems that could be addressed by anything else. So the communism came. But the problems remained. Communism disappeared. But how do you address those problems now? Unemployment problem. It's all over. Europe is shaking for the unemployment problem. I'm sure you have your part of those problems. And the problem of dependency for living on the state charity. Which doesn't make any sense why any human being should be dependent on charities for their life. So how do you overcome that? How young people live on their own strength and contribute to the society rather than become a burden on the society? How do you design that? What are your thoughts? And you are the generation who has enormous technology individually. When Sputnik went off, not everybody has that technology. But some group of people, scientists, designed it. But here today, you have this technology. You are the Facebook generation, no matter where the Facebook coming from, but you are a Facebook generation. You are integrated. You are connected with the rest of the world. And how do you see to address those problems of poverty, problem of unemployment, problem of environmental degradations, all the things we hear? Do we have to carry this on? Or we say, no, like Soviet Union disappeared, like the Berlin Wall disappeared, this will disappear like this in 25 years. And that's what we'll do. What's your feeling on that?
Do you still feel yourself international? Yeah. Oh, you're still nationwide, nation limited thinking. And I guess the audience could join us. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Could we have please take the mic and.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that we are the new generation of the new country. Now here I'm holding the United Nations Charter, and I should say that we all, the members of the model United Nations, we share those principles which are enclosed here, and we want to see the world in peace and stability. That is proclaimed by all the people here, and I think we should share the same interests and the same principles of democracy, of most people living in peace and stability. And that is the main reason why we are here, why we are discussing the global problems and raise the global issues. That is the question.
Okay, so you feel internationally, not nationwide?
Both nationwide and international.
What about unemployment?
Okay, I think it's going to be next question, yes. Thank you.
There is a willing who again with the UN Charter. Yeah?
Good afternoon, dear guests. It's a great honor for us to present here. Let me introduce myself. My name is Oleg Reshikov. I am the fourth-year student of the MGIMO University, and I am the Secretary General of the Model United Nations of Moscow 2014. As we are all the students of the MGIMO University, I hope the majority of us will connect our lives with the international affairs, and we will feel us as the members of the global community. But in my view, we have something special in Russia. Our Russian background should be useful for the global community, as we have something interesting, thrilling, and exciting to show to the world. I think and I believe that our team of the Moscow International Model United Nations 2014 is to reaffirm the status of the Model UN as a great educational, scientific and analytical program. And in this case, we really want to share our Russian experience with the global community, but at the same time, we really need to communicate with our international partners. And in this case, I hope if we launch a great educational program within the model United Nations, we can employ our alumni, and they are to challenge, to face this problem of unemployment and other challenges of the modern world. And in this case, I hope we have some prospects about the cooperation with our international partners. And I would like to ask, is it possible to expand the cooperation between our university, our model UN, with our partners in the United Nations, in the United Nations Foundation, through the MGIMO University, or as we are the program of the United Nations Association of Russia, through the United Nations Association of Russia. Thank you very much.
It's both declaration and question to the UN Foundation. Someone to add? Who is not from the UN Association? By the way, about unemployment, it's really a good thing, but officially there is no those who are officially registered as unemployed among MGIMO alumnus. So from this point of view, it's still a unique university because it brings to the market those who are well qualified and those who are useful to the market, both, I mean, the government agencies and the private sector. Though the government agencies were provided about 15% of our alumni, the rest they go to the market economy. Yes, Emma Rothschild and then Kofi.
All of you in different ways talked about the place of Russia in the world. And I wondered about the extent to which people here are interested in the nearly 50 years of experience of the Soviet Union within the United Nations. Obviously, there's a fascinating Russian experience of the last 23 years, which is very important to share. But a large part of the history of Russia in the world was the Soviet Union as a part of many, many international organizations. In many ways, the story goes back, it's a complicated story, well before the foundation of the United Nations. I mean, I was very happy that Marina was optimistic that Europe had come out of the economic crisis, given the, with some exceptions, given the levels of youth unemployment. But the League of Nations saw a major, almost global mobilization to try and do something about unemployment, which had a lot in common with what you're going to all be hearing about when you have the G20 here later this year. So I wondered whether this whole subject of Russia in the 20th century is part of the educational component of what you all as scholars are interested in. Yes.
Who's going to answer? But by the way, International Labour Organization was inherited by UN from the League of Nations, so history never ends. It takes, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, but my commentary will be sort of short. I would say that we are still the first generation after the Soviet Union, so we are still sometimes look back, maybe.
Because he's historian.
Yes, it happened so. So that's why I believe that we even maybe have to look back. Of course, the experience of the last 23 years is also important for Russia, for our neighbor countries, for just for maybe the whole world, for countries, for emerging powers of the world. But as I happen to be historian, I believe that so that's why I believe that we should look back. Thank you.
Secretary.
No, I think it's good to have two historians here. No, because without a sense of history, you can't really have a vision as to where to go. And I wanted to ask a question about Emma went back 50 years ago or more with the UN, and I want to go back to 89 and the changes which has taken place and the impact that it has had on society. You were not old enough to see it, you've read about it and all that, but now you're seeing what's happening in the Middle East with young people in the Tahrir Square and all this. When you see these thousands of people in the streets demanding rights, asking to have a say in how they are governed and by whom, and looking for changes, what does that say to you? How do you react to young people there trying to take charge, trying to have an impact, trying to have a revolution? As a young person, seeing the others across the world, how do you feel? Or in Brazil, for that matter, these days they've been very active, and we are probably going to see more social upheavals around the world for some of the reasons, the economic difficulties, the youth unemployment, reforms. What does that say to you?
Julia, you should answer, because Julia, she speaks Arabian, she works even an interpreter at her spare time, owning money.
Yes, I think I'll just present my first point of view, and then my colleagues will share it, I hope, because we discussed a lot when the Arab Spring starts and when we saw the first changes in the Middle East and also Brazil and Greece, also when people went out to the streets. We discussed it a lot in our class and between, because it's really touched us to heart that young people all around the world, they share the same problems as everywhere, as in Africa, as in Russia, and the Europe, and in highly developed country and just emerging economies. We're all thinking about the same. We want a security, we want a peace, we want a stability, we want to have a chance to build our life, to build our families, and to be happy. That's our way for humanity. And about the Arab Spring itself, about this, the main case, and it's very specific case, as we all know that all political changes, they are all based on economic problems. Yes, that the government never make changes without their economical core in this vision. We know that revolutions...
Look, what was your reaction upon the first appraisals in the Arab world? Because you know the countries, you've been many times there. What was your first reaction? Because these general words, they're good, but people, they're professionals with the general words. Because
yes, I'm sorry to sound general, but it was the personal, and I'll go to the point that, of course, we all were shocked when it started. No one could predict it, that it will be so loud. We knew that it can be some people going out to the street, ask for something, demand for their rights, their human rights violations in the Middle East and in Maghreb and in Mashriq and every regions of the Arab countries. But we all were shocked that the government will be so crucial against their demand for rights. And it will turn into the real war, the civil wars. For so long we couldn't believe that it's a war in the streets. Through all the media and different media, they showed us different dimensions, that it's just a small, as in Arab say, muzaharat, just a small direction, but it was a real war, killing people for the idea, for their rights. And it's a great pain for us that it's happening. That's what can I say.
Okay.
I'll just make a consideration, because I think there is more in common now nowadays among the young people throughout the boundaries than there is sometimes within generations within the same country. So I think there is, as you said, there is something global happening that we're not understanding. But I'll go back a little bit to the fact that this is a world of interdependence more and more. And I say normally that the organization chart we have designed to solve the problems of the world by defining each country, let's say, as a box, does not address the issues of migration, financial flows, of even environmental issues. It's totally inadequate. Therefore, we need this transnational, and UN certainly is one of the answers. But I'll go back to what Marina said, and bringing from my perspective, BRICS. So what do you see from as a Russian perspective, as a young perspective, what is the meaning of having BRICS, of having these countries discussing? Do you think they are addressing this issue of the need to coordinate, or is it too small of a forum, or is it appropriate because we are at different economic cycles? What is your opinion?
Okay. To be honest, for now, the BRICS countries, we use for statistics to show that their role in world trade and world production is increasing every year, especially from the 2008 when most developed countries lost their positions on many goods. The BRICS countries increased their production and their trade volumes. However, if we see the perspectives, the trade between these countries, the cross-investment, now we see that there are a lot of discussions and so yeah, so for now what I can say that we'll see how it will develop in a year or two and in 10 years. So
What's about our time? Nice. Yes. I guess. Look, just to be fair with those who share the audience with us, let's take the questions from the audience to give you an idea what people are interested in, and then someone who could sum it up there.
First of all, I would like to say a lot of thanks to speakers and to Mr. Annan for a wonderful speech and presentation of his book. My name is Pavel Koshkin. I'm a journalist from Russia Beyond the Headlines and a student from Moscow State University. I have a very question regarding future world order and just who will shape the global politics in the next 20 years? How the world order look like, and will it be unipolar, multipolar, or non-polar at all? Will the concept of superpower will survive in the future, and how it will be will be adjusted to the global governance concept? Thank you.
No.
The short answer is you.
No, I think on the question of the shape of the world and whether it's going to be unipolar world and multipolar world, I have never accepted the concept of a unipolar world. And in fact, it's also a disturbing concept because there were always other poles. Washington, and some people in Washington may consider Washington the only pole, but even in those days, Beijing considered itself a pole, Moscow considered itself a pole, so did Delhi and others. And the question of when you believe you are the only elephant in the room, your behavior is different. When there are other elephants, you also adapt. And I think we are beginning to understand that there is room, and indeed there are more than one elephant in the world today. There are multiple poles, and there will continue to be multiple poles. one country may, for a period, have a certain advantage or dominance in one area or the other. But the concept of unipolar world, I think, is something that we can't forget. There will always be multipolar. Some elephants may be bigger than the others, but they will be there to check each other. Thanks.
Thank you. And now I give the word to the closing remarks and remarks also on behalf of Mr. Ted Turner, who should left us, to Kathy Calvin.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone on behalf of Ted Turner, our founder and chairman, for sharing your thoughts and your insights. This has been a very rich hour, and I know he will be eager to hear what we learned today. He founded the organization to allow individuals or other organizations to work together, bring their ideas, their resources, and their commitment to work directly with the United Nations. So that's why we're here, and that's obviously why you're there. In an era of declining trust in institutions, it's encouraging to hear that you have faith. And I would just remind you that in a multipolar world, that's not only governments, but it's also civil society, corporations, and of course, citizens. So to us, it's a very exciting time to be part of thinking about our future together. So let us, again, thank you all for being with us today, and we look forward to a ongoing conversation. And we'll come back and talk to the young man about a partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And now you're all invited to a buffet lunch just round the corner, and I guess you will have a chance to ask some questions in a private way. Thank you.